Good day, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. My name is Eric, and I will be the moderator for this meeting. I will do a very short introduction to this platform, so everyone is up to speed with the platform. Please note that you will only be able to see and hear the presenter. So in this case, you will only see me. This is typical for this platform, that you can hear only one speaker at a time. When you wish to speak, when you wish to ask a question during a Q&A session, please raise your hand by pressing the hand icon top left of your screen. This will send me a notification, so I know that you want to take the floor, and I can pass the floor on to you. You can use the chat function to communicate between you or with me. If you have a technical issue, first please refresh your browser, and if that does not solve the problem, please use the chat function to communicate, and we will try to help you as much as we can. There's also the question mark icon on the bottom left of your screen, and that is a connection with technical support, and they will also be able to help you. Left of the chat window, there is the Your Language button. That is the button where you can select the language in which you would like to follow the meeting. So please select the language of your choice to follow the meeting there. I will now pass the floor on to our first speaker, Thierry Huor. Thierry, the floor is yours.
Merci pour la.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and showing so much interest for WAPES and SOCSO. This is the Malaysian Social Security Department. We're also supported by the International Labour Departments. We're delighted to be talking about such an interesting topic this morning. We're going to be addressing the impact of COVID-19 on the labour markets, and this thanks to two different panels. To start off with, I will have the honour of being the moderator, and we'll be looking at the ways in which the PSs are helping recovery plans. And in the second session, which will be moderated by one of SOCSO's representatives, we will be looking at policies and actions engaged in order to support the most concerned populations and industries. But without further ado, let's go to our president for the Asia Pacific region, Mr. Yong Dong-da, and then we will be giving the floor to the CEO of SOCSO, Mr. Mohammed Azman. We have a slight change of agenda. Our Vice President is unable to be here with us today. However, he has sent a message, and it is a video message. I'm going to ask Juanita to start the video of Mr. Wang Dongda. Thank you very much and have a wonderful session.
Greetings,
There seems to be a little problem with the audio from this video, so please stand by. We will try again and go back to the video message. Sorry for this interruption again, but there seems to be a little problem with the audio of the video. I will now pass the floor back to Thierry Huor while we try to solve the issue.
Okay, thank you very much, and I apologize for these technical hitches. Without further ado, I'm going to be giving the floor to our next speaker. We'll be giving the floor to SOCSO CEO, Dr. Sri Dr. Mohammed Azman. You have the floor. Dr. Sri Dr. Mohammed Azman, you have the floor. Merci beaucoup Thierry. Mesdames et messieurs, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette conférence, ce webinaire. Je ne sais pas si c'est le matin, l'après-midi ou la soirée, là où vous êtes. En tant que PDG de SOCSO, il s'agit de l'organisation de sécurité sociale qui co-organise cette conférence avec l'AMCEP et CLEA. C'est un plaisir pour moi de vous souhaiter la bienvenue à cette conférence 2020. Nous allons nous pencher sur l'incidence de la COVID-19 sur le marché du travail et j'aimerais...
Mozuri, the WAPES Executive Secretary, Mr. Abdul Munim Al-Madani, the WAPES President and Chief Executive Officer of ANAPEC, Morocco, and Mr. Yong Don Na, the WAPES Asia Pacific Vice President and KIS President, for making time together at this virtual conference despite your busy schedules. We are honored by your presence and hope that you, like all our participants, will find this conference both engaging and informative. On behalf of SOCSO Malaysia, I would like to apologize for not being able to host the conference physically as previously planned. Due to ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we had no choice but to switch to a virtual format. Thanks to the advances in technology, a virtual conference can be organized as efficiently or better than a physical conference. Nonetheless, we remain eager to host you in Malaysia and hope that you can all visit our beautiful country once the pandemic is over. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may have noticed from our virtual conference format, there is not a single aspect of our lives that has not been touched by COVID-19. Many of us are working from home and limiting our activities outside to prevent the spread of the disease. Even then, we are the lucky ones. Many workers worldwide have either lost their jobs or forced to accept pay cuts or take prolonged unpaid leave, as companies' incomes are squeezed by plummeting revenues. Across the Asia-Pacific region, containment efforts have met with mixed success. Few countries have largely been successful in controlling the spread of the disease, while others are still figuring out the best strategies. Nonetheless, even if we manage to control the disease within our own borders, our exports and tourism-related sectors such as accommodation, food and beverage, and the airline industry are still vulnerable due to weak demand as the virus rages worldwide. We also cannot pin our hopes solely on the two recently announced vaccines by Pfizer or BioNTech and Moderna, as it could take months to manufacture, ship, and administer the vaccines to everyone in the need. In the meantime, hundreds and thousands of businesses might be forced to close down and millions of livelihoods would be affected. We therefore must respond to the calls by the United Nations Development Programme to act quickly and decisively to minimize the socio-economic costs of the pandemic. As an Association of Public Employment Services, PS, agencies, we are gathered here today to share insights on mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on the labour market via economic stimulus packages and active labour market policies that safeguard health, employment and social security. In line with WAPES' commitment to diversity and promoting equal opportunities, we are pleased to welcome past representatives from 3 continents, which is Asia, Europe, and Africa, who will share the experience in implementing economic stabilization programs in their respective countries with us. We are also grateful for the participation of experts from SOCIO, an agency of the European Union that provides expertise in social protection, labour and employment, as well as from the International Labour Organization, ILO. We are confident that their research-backed recommendations will prove helpful to all PES officers present with the developing economics intervention frameworks to support workers and businesses through the worst impact of the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia's experience with COVID-19 proves that we cannot be complacent in the face of a rapidly evolving pandemic. Just a few months ago, we had the virus spread mostly under control. Business were operating normally and the public was free to travel wherever they wanted within Malaysian borders. In early October, it all changed. The number of new daily cases, which used to be in single digit, spiked into high hundreds and even exceeded the 1,000 figures marked on some days. Left with no choice, the government was forced to declare a partial lockdown to limit the spread. Luckily, SOCSO Malaysia, through our employment insurance system, EIS, which is barely 3 years old, has been at the forefront in saving the businesses from collapse and preserving millions of employments. Since mid-June 2020, SOCSO EIS has been transformed into public employment services through our new job portal, My Future Jobs. Besides assisting tens of thousands of workers who lost their jobs and income by disbursing unemployment insurance benefits immediately, SOCSO EIS implements various types of ALMP via government's economic stimulus package, such as Employment Retention Program, Wage Subsidy Program, Reskilling and Upskilling, Hiring Incentives Programs, Mobility Assistance, and subsidizing Social Security coverage for gig workers. All these labour market interventions implemented by SOCSO has managed to cushion the economic blow of the COVID-19, which would have crippled Malaysia's economy and the labour market. If the current partial lockdown lasts longer than expected, we already have the government's forward-looking into active labour market policy to thank for saving hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs. Dire as the situation may seem, I believe that we will all emerge stronger from the current crisis if we continue collaborating with and learning from each other as per WAPES values. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude on this hopeful note by expressing my sincere gratitude to my colleagues at WAPES, KEYS and SOCSO, whose hard work and cooperation have made this conference possible. The success of this conference is truly a testament as to what we can achieve if we cooperate in pursuit of a common goal. I would like to thank all of our international speakers who have kindly volunteered to share their expertise with us. I look forward to your presentations, which I hope would contribute to the formulation of SOCSO policies in the future. I wish you all a pleasant conference and the best of luck in combating the pandemic. Thank you. I yield the floor back to the MC. Thank you.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Na Young-don, the Vice President of World Association of Public Employment Services from Asia and Pacific region. First of all, I would like to mention that it is my great honor to meet Dr. Mohamed Azman, the CEO of Social Security Organization, and as well as an organizer of this event, Ms. Eve Mari, who supports WAPES as Secretary General, and all the other working professionals of WAPES colleagues. I would also like to extend my heartfelt congratulations to WAPES members for hosting this WAPES Asia and Pacific Region Conference on a very timely and with a topic that is deeply related to recent COVID-19 crisis. The outbreak and widespread of the COVID-19 has brought us unprecedented challenges among almost every sector, from economy and society to politics on a great scale. Especially, we have faced a huge shock and changes in the employment and labor market. As this conference stands as a stage for many nations to share their unique experiences and knowledge related to COVID-19, I truly believe that our topic for this conference, addressing the impact of COVID-19 on the labor market, will have a huge meaning to our global society. Korea Employment Information Service, a public institution where I serve as the president, is an institution specialized in solving employment and labor-related issues. We also generate employment and labor market data, development employment service networks, and do research on career path guidance. Particularly, we have been putting huge effort with the Korean government to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on employment, which has the same line with the topic of today's conference. Employment condition in the Republic of Korea is yet improving with the extension of COVID-19. Especially, the employment rate is constantly reducing in the service industry as they require face-to-face interactions. Moreover, the people who are vulnerable in the employment market, including temporary workers, day workers, and the self-employed, are still going through troublesome times. In order to overcome such difficulties, Korean government has set up revised supplementary budget 4 times, and is now actively supporting the employment market by stabilizing the employment conditions, assisting the employment of the vulnerable people, and providing basic livelihood support. By taking a closer look of these issues by sector, first and foremost, the Korean government is supporting employers so that they can maintain employment. We are actively supporting the corporate by expanding the scope, level, and period of beneficiaries of the employment maintenance subsidy, with a focus on industries that were heavily hit by COVID-19, including but not limited to the tourism industry. Second, we have strengthened our employment and livelihood support for the vulnerable classes. We are carrying out immediate support on workers who are under special employment conditions, who cannot receive unemployment benefit from employment insurance, like part-time workers, freelance workers, and the self-employed. Furthermore, we are currently expanding our budget for unemployment benefit and strengthening vocational training and employment support service in order to strengthen our re-employment and livelihood support services for the unemployed. As to achieve our goal, we are now supporting the government to create 1,550,000 jobs in the public and private sectors. Further, we are trying hard to vitalize the uncontact employment service as a response to COVID-19. We are now offering career fast guidance service, including career consultation for the youth and the vocational aptitude test. Also, we have changed our method of offering vocational training from offline group training to untagged online types. Besides, Korea Employment Information Service has been making preparations for digital transformation based on big data analysis and artificial intelligence technologies. We are now carrying out data-driven innovation through the offering of information as services useful to the public by integrating employment-related data that is scattered in public and private sectors. Recently, with COVID-19, PRES is being widely used instead of overcoming COVID-19 or post-COVID-19. This would mean that we have to make appropriate change as a new normal is being required in all sectors, including employment and labor due to COVID-19. I believe that employment service is one of the most important measures in solving employment and labor issue induced from COVID-19. Activities at the World Association of Public Employment Services are based on sharing various policies, actions, and responses, and that is why I believe that the WAPES can make sustainable contributions in solving global employment issues. As a closing comment, I wish you all the success, happiness, and joy in life. Best wish for your bright future. Thank you.
Eh bien, merci pour avoir permis de...
Thank you very much for having made it possible for us to hear our president. I would like our vice president. I would also like to thank the CEO from SUCSO. Let's go straight into the first panel. The first panel will be looking at how public employment services help recovery programs that have been launched by the government. In this panel, we will have 3 speakers. Each speaker will have 10 minutes, and then we'll take 5 minutes at the end to take any questions that you may have. I would encourage you to use the chat for this purpose. You can see that you can ask a question. There is a question mark, and you'll be able to ask any questions that you have to ensure that your question isn't lost in the general chat. To start off with, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Umajay Abdullah, who is the head of the Department for Information Analysis for SUCSO. The second speaker will be Madame Mudventurini, who is the head of the Department for Information Engineering at Pôle Emploi, and we will also be able to welcome Professor Pedro Martins, who is an economist and specialist at the Queen Mary University of London, and thanks to SocioPlus is able to partake today and take the floor. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to our first speaker for the panel. Let's go through all of this. And we can start straight away with Mr. Umajai Kumar Abdullah, Head of Department, Employment Information Analysis Services Division at SOCSO, and he's going to be looking at how we've been able to stabilise the Malaysian economy through the implementation of the employment insurance system and the National Employment Service Portal and My Future Jobs. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, my greetings to Mr. Abdul Monim, the WAPES President, Ms. Eve Marie, the WAPES Executive Secretary, Mr. Yong Dunna, the WAPES Asia Pacific Vice President, and WAPES Worldwide, all government agencies, employer representatives, and union representatives. I thank WAPES for giving me this opportunity to share our experience, Malaysian experience in handling stabilizing the Malaysian economy during COVID-19. And allow me to share the next slide. All right. I'll start with some background overview of what had transpired during this year. Malaysia recorded its first COVID-19 case on the 24th January, but during that time, the situation was not considered serious enough to warrant a large-scale lockdown until 18 March, when the first movement control order was imposed. And as you know, during the lockdown, all activities was a total stop, where only those essential services like those involving grocery stores, pharmacies, and were allowed to continue to operate. And we were able to control the situation until and slowly the restrictions were slowly lifted over the following months. With most offices reopening from 5th May onwards, and life was back to normal with only single-digit cases recorded. Unfortunately, a sudden spike in new cases from October onwards has forced the government to tighten restrictions again, which it can be extended further if the case numbers didn't go down. And let's move on to the next slide. And while the initial lockdown in March was successful in stopping the spread of the disease, it came at a huge economic cost. The Malaysian economy contracted by or declined in the GDP negative 17.1% in Q2 2020, and the worst performance since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. As of Q3, the economy still have not recovered. It simply recorded a smaller contraction of 2.7%. And again, although the number does not look promising, there is good reason to believe that there could be a much worse if government intervention to protect jobs and business did not take place. While indicating that the sharp drop in economic output was also not matched by an equally sharp rise in job losses. And we experienced a number of job losses. That is, as at on the 20th of November, around 97,000 job losses were recorded. And again, with the large-scale economic stimulus packages rolled out by the Malaysian government, and this has helped employers to at least survive during this time. And I'll move to the next slide. The Malaysian government has protected jobs by providing generous wage subsidies to workers and businesses in the private sector. Through SOCSO, the Social Security Organization, we have implemented the wage subsidy program. There were two parts of the program implemented. That is the wage subsidy program 1.0 and later stage, which was enforced on the 1st of October. That is the wage subsidy 2.0. The intention of this wage subsidy is to help employers to sustain during these difficult times. And totaling amount of RM, our Malaysian currency, of 16.8 billion were allocated for this program. And during the recovery stage, which we have the government had planned, whereby we have introduced hiring incentive programs. Again, the intention of this program is to stimulate job demand by the employer, and an amount of Malaysian ringgit of 1.5 billion was allocated for this program, and it helps the employer to hire our job seekers, those who have lost their job, so that the employer will be able to hire them, and with an incentive to be given to the employer. And we also implemented a special program. This is to help those were instructed with the agreement of the worker to go for unpaid leave. And this was implemented earlier, at the earlier stage, whereby during the lockdown, there are some businesses who couldn't operate, and they have to, with the agreement of the worker, to allow the worker to go for unpaid leave. And with this allocation, it has helped the workers during this time, that they are able to sustain for a temporary period. At the same time, when the implementation of the wage subsidy program was implemented, the worker benefited through this subsidy. And again, though with the subsidy being allocated or being implemented to help the employers, there are certain cases whereby employers, they are unable to sustain. They have to allow, or they have to make a decision, that is to terminate or to retrench their workers. Those workers, they fall under our employment insurance scheme or system, whereby we process claims, that is to assist the worker through providing of the benefits under, whereby we have this benefit, we call it as the job search allowance. And with this, the activation of job search and matching took place, that is to help workers to be back, to be placed again. And through this mechanism, I can summarize that we have helped almost around 393,000 employers and almost 3.3 million workers at the moment now, which we have protected them from being retrenched. They are able to work and being paid salary for their livelihood. And allow me to move to the next slide. These are some basic statistics which was recorded as at 6 November. We have the current statistics. As I mentioned earlier, loss of employment. We have recorded currently as at 20th of this month. The figure is around 97,821 cases of loss of employment was recorded. And again, if we were to compare with the figure job placement, so far we are trying our best to meet all the to place all the workers as many as possible. And again, the employment services of our division, they have been working very hard. That is to register as many vacancies as possible. This is to cater for both category of workers, that is the medium to low skill, and also those with skill or shall we say professional. And till as to date, the job seekers that we have registered, there's around 359,000 job seekers, and we will try our best to place all who is in need of our services, and hopefully we are able to assist them. And again, analysis wise, we see that there are a lot more that we can do, that is to help those in need of assistance. And we are proud to say that though we are 3 years in existence, we have been established, and we are able to cope with the current demand, and at the same time to assist all the people of Malaysia. And I'll move to the next slide. There are challenges that we have to be realistic, that though whatever that we do, there are still challenges that we need to cope with. Even though with the packages that we have implemented, there are still questions which we are unable to answer. Definitely, the rising in the COVID-19 as per the third wave in Malaysia now. Again, we are not sure that how far that we are able to stop or reduce as many of the those infected cases. Again, the implementation of a conditional movement control order, how far it is effective, and at the same time whether there are other special kind of movement control order to be considered. This need to be debated in a high level and again the sluggish global trade and export seems to be also a barrier to the raging COVID-19, as it is a worldwide impact which we have to understand. And this especially has impacted our tourism related industries. And again, we are trying our best to assist this sector or this industry as to avoid any chance of massive retrenchment. And again, we are also facing this challenge that soon the graduates which will be graduating, again, this is an area which we have to be able to support. With that, I move on to the next slide. I believe through the beginning of the year, we have learned a lot. One thing for sure, the active labor market programs such as the wage subsidy program, employment retention program, it is the most appreciated by the businesses, and it is being implemented timely with less processes, and it meets the requirement of the employer during this tough time. And which subsidy program, employment retention program, play a very important role in stabilizing employment, and it helps to retain employment and stop the risk of worker being retrenched. And again, though we have assisted those workers employed by the employers, but there are this sector which we would like to explore further, that is the self-employed, which they are most badly affected in terms of income security and safety net. And again, this will take measures which to suit the required sector of the self-employed, and at the same time the inadequacy of EIS fund for economic shocks, which I would say that the fund is to be used for those who are facing those who are in the category of loss of employment, and at the same time, wage subsidy program and ERP program and employment retention program are from the allocation coming from the government. And therefore, again, this is an area that we have learned that in future we need to strengthen our EIS fund, maybe through our revision of our act. And at the same time, absence of data is also crucial. The data that we have collected may be not sufficient enough for us to project again whatever plans or intervention to be formulated. Again, survey data does not really helpful in, or shall I say, it is too long to collect and to come up with the findings. And currently, the EIS policy is only meant for loss of employment, which I've mentioned earlier. And again, we also have chances of getting more vacancies by way of imposing moratorium on hiring of foreign worker. But again, these posts may not be attractive enough for our locals, as they are under the category of 3D jobs, or known as the difficult, dangerous and dirty. But above all, to conclude, during this time, SOCSO has been the forefront in helping those not only who has lost their jobs, but also employers to retain their workers. And this, I would say, record-wise, we have done quite a good job. With that, I think this is that was my last slide, and thank you for the time. And again, I pass back the floor to the moderator.
Merci, Monsieur Abdullah, pour cette présentation.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, for this presentation. I'm going to give you the floor again because we actually have some questions for you. The first question for you is that you talked about the different subsidy programs, job safeguard programs. The question is, did they exist prior to the COVID-19 crisis, or have they been implemented since the beginning of the crisis? And if they are new, is the Malaysian government planning on keeping these programs? You can take the floor again, Mr. Abdullah.
Thank you for the question. As I've explained earlier, the Employment Insurance System Act 2017, it is only to help. I mean, the benefits are for those who have, this is to protect those workers who have lost their jobs. The initiative which we have implemented earlier, it is a program which we have conducted or we have implemented during this year, which it was a situation where we were asked to come up with a plan that is how to manage or address the situation as such during COVID-19. So we have benchmarked a few of the findings from which we found from ILO websites and a few other websites. And with that, we came up with the idea or the package called the Employment Retention Program. This is to help those workers which they were placed under unpaid leave. And the second was being the wage subsidy program. And the third is the hiring incentive programs. Thank you. I pass back the floor to the moderator.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much for your answer, rather. I have one last question, and then we can move on to the next presentation. Here is my question about information storage, about employees and employers that contribute to the unemployment contributions, as you've presented. There's a question with regards to this system. With such an impressive system, could you not share the data in real time to carry out an analysis? And I think that this is related to how quickly we can manage and process data and real-time information.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for the question. Again, I believe the market is wide. The information that we capture are more towards those contributors that contributes to EIS and SOCSO. And to come up with a intervention plan, not only to cover those workers within the sector that we cover, or those contributors that, or should I call them as the insured person. We also would love to see other areas that we are able to help. So the lack of data is one part which we are thinking of how to upgrade. That is the key, I believe, that we like to listen from the expert. We would like to learn from the expert. I think this is not only the session that we will be having. We need to have further conversation and learn from the expert on how to cater for both sides of the market or the labor market. I pass back the floor to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now suggest we give the floor to Mrs. Maud Venturini, Head of Information Engineering at the Department of Territorial Career Evolution. She's going to talk about a program which has been put into place by the government and Pôle emploi. Maud Venturini, would you like to take the floor? She's Head of Training Engineering at the Department of Skills Development of the Territories.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you very much for this introduction. I will indeed present you the French Skills Investment Plan, which is an investment plan that was put in place by the government, the actual government, when he was in place 4 years ago. And to do that, I want to explain a little bit how the organization of vocational training in France is organized today. What is really important to know that it's that the local governments, our regions, our political regions, the governors are elected politicals, are in charge of implementing the training and the vocational training policies in France, in our territories. However, the state is also involved and the companies are also involved, as you will see. And Pôle emploi, which is the French employment service, provides support only for unemployed workers, unemployed people. So the skills investment plan is a 15 billion euro 5-year roadmap, aiming to train 1 million low-skilled or unskilled job seekers and 1 million young people. That was the initial objective, to meet the needs of the company for recruiting and to contribute to skill transformation also by digitalization. So I will show you, it is structured around 3 lines of intervention: more trainings, but also innovation through new paths of training, and also through digitalization of upskilling and reskilling opportunities for job seekers. What is interesting is that in this crisis period, we have put in place with the government has put in place and we implement it at Pôle emploi, is a new recovery plan. This recovery plan strengthens the skill investment plan, and through focuses on the job of the future, through more digitalization, and we always focus on less qualified, and we even more focus now on young people. I want here to show you a few examples that what we put in place at a national level in France to support in this skill investment plan, but also in this new plan for recovery plan for 2020. We've put up a market of training, which is called FAOD, which is a 100% remote learning courses, targeting specific profiles, especially for us people who have low access to training normally, who live in remote places. We also have people living on islands. As you know, in France we have a lot of territories very far from France. We have an objective that we will surely obtain of 15,000 trainees in 2020, and our objective is to raise the access to training, and so the rise of trainees in general. We are actually right now looking up a bit of what happened since March, since we launched this market. It was planned, but we had an unexpected success with this remote learning courses. It's really interesting what we have right now. It's people are more focused in the trainings. What the training organizations tell us is that people are more focused. People have a better success and better access to employment after the training. So they are really focused, maybe because it's because of the situation right now in France, and everybody is sometimes locked at home, so that they have time and time to concentrate for learning courses. We don't know already, but it's really interesting what we have here. We also have strengthened the POE, which is a vocational training before a recruitment for employment for employees. So it's really the idea of being really close to the needs of the employers and companies. CLEA Digital, it's also something interesting because it's aimed on less qualified people, and especially young people. It's the idea that we diagnose the situation of the young people if it has capacities to work with digital, and if not, we train him directly with this training program. The trainees' allowances have been increased also this year by a few €100 for mostly the young, aimed at the young people, but in general the training allowances that Pôle Emploi finances have been raised. And maybe you've heard of it, the personal training account, which is a national individual account that everybody, every human being in France, adult has access to. Every year he gets some more money in his account, and he has the access of buying on his own some training programs. The issue for us is to still accompany those people, to still be with them in their project, and so we are linked to this personal training account so that people, so that we can pay as Pôle Emploi some of the training programs, but also accompany the people that are following those programs. So this I talked to you about. It's also the individual training path of this open distance learning courses. Indeed, the trainees have the possibility to choose the intensity of their training during the week, but also the length of and as a matter of fact, the length of the course in the long term. So it's also interesting for us to start to see that people have experimented different distance learning courses path, and that it adapts to a woman having to take care of her children during the day, or someone who has another job during the day, or someone who has full time to learn and do it really quickly to find a job afterward. So this, I presented to you the CLEA certification. So this I will move more quickly. This upskilling before recruitment as well. This is also, I will go again, this is also interesting because we work with competencies operators. Those are representatives of employers, branches, and they provide us with recruitment issues in specific sectors. And so we work with them directly. They are intermediate between Pôle Emploi and employers, as we could see, because there are only 11 in France, and it enables us to be more focused where we put our finances and how we focus on specific branches where the needs are from the employer. Because the issues for us is always to know where are the needs, which move and which evolves during time. I will also finish by presenting you an example of the scale investment plan in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. What is a specialty also in France with Pôle Emploi is that this skill investment plan is a national plan, so we have some national initiatives, but normally it is a contract between the state and the region, so the political region, as I explained you at the beginning, and the regions are in charge of putting up more trainings of some innovations, so they are putting some projects, and people can answer and ask for finance to innovate. but in two regions, which are Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes and Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, so in the mountains and in the south, so Marseille and Lyon, if you know, France a little bit. It is Pôle emploi who is in charge of putting of implementing this plan, this investment plan, because the region, in fact, kind of refused this contract with the state. So Pôle emploi, as an operator, was in charge of implementing it. So we have really a field of experimenting in those two regions with a lot of money, as you can see, 150 million euros per year, nearly. And we have been focusing on promising sectors, as we call it them, industries, health, agriculture in the south, for example, and transport and logistics. It's also an example down, and on innovation. So we've had and we are starting to see some of the results of those innovations with training paths that are reinforced for very low-skilled people and people really far from the job market. So we are accompanying them with the training path is way more expensive, but we are starting to see some results to bring those people into a formal training program, which can bring it to a diploma, a certificate, which is really important in France. It's kind of the goal of this skill investment plan, to bring people to a diploma and a certificate. We have here an example of the potential detection in the transport and logistics sector. It's indeed a pathway to discover this profession, and with some pre-qualifying and qualifying training. Indeed, our objective is to put people in traineeships. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm pleased to pick up some questions, if there are.
Thank you very much, Maud, for this presentation. I personally have one question. It's with regards to identifying territorial needs in matters of skills. For Pôle emploi, do you have a method? Do you have any particular tools that you use with your partners in order to collect and identify needs when it comes to skills in a territory?
Indeed, as I said before, we have operators with whom we work, and we try to collect some information about the needs. We also have some statistics analysis internal in Pôle emploi and with the labor ministry. But indeed, as we see it right now, because it's a good example, the actual situation, the government has put some 5 pilot sectors, and one of them, a good example, is the health sector. And it is still a big issue for us to know exactly where the needs are, the competencies are, which are moving. So we have a lot of experimentations with the companies, with the sectors, with the operators, to know where the skills are needed. And one very interesting, but it's mostly regional, local, and with few sectors. It's in the north of France. For example, we are working with industries and the food industry and the big industries, if I could say. And we are trying to see a common training path for a few jobs that could enable people to move from one sector to another. And this is a big work, and we are trying to develop this in the whole France, but it has the issue is that it has to be local and it has to be with the actors of the sectors and in the local regions in France. So at the national level, of course, we have statistics, but we see that the regional and territorial initiatives are working the best.
Thank you very much, Maud. We are speaking about statistics, and we have been speaking about statistics and information on the labour market. They're really important in order to guide our decisions and our actions. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Professor Pedro Martins, who is a labour economist and specialist and professor at Queen Mary University London. He is going to be speaking to us about a study that was conducted on labour markets information systems at the Service of Recovery Policies. Pedro Martins, you have the floor.
Very good morning or good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this fantastic event. I would like to tell you about labor market information systems. I'm trying to move forward to the next slide. I believe labor market information systems can play a critical role in the current context. I would like to discuss a number of ideas, including practical ideas that may be of use in terms of taking labor market information systems forward. My presentation is based to a large extent on a report that I contributed to SocioPlus on labor market vision, which is available from the SocioPlus website. So you are all welcome to download it and read more about this subject. I would say that the key message that I would like to convey is that information is really critical for a good performance of the labor market, and this is even more the case in the current times when the economy and the labor market are changing in a rapid pace. So to collect information about these developments, to make it available to all the stakeholders in the labor market can really make a big difference and can help make sure that the economy and the labor market can adjust more rapidly, and in particular that unemployment levels can be as low as possible. And in this context, public employment services play, I think, a very important role. So these are some of the ideas that I would like to discuss in more detail in the next slides. So I start with a brief overview of what I mean and what most people mean by labor market information systems. So it's a very general concept which encompasses many different variables that have to do with the labor demand side, with firms that are looking for workers to fill their vacancies, but also the labor supply side, so individuals that are looking for jobs, and also the matching between these two sides, namely jobs that will occur, will last for different periods of time, and also all the institutions that influence in one way or another the outcomes in the labor market. So if we think about all the activities that can take place within the labor market information system, then we see that they are very large list of activities. It can be about collecting the evidence, processing the evidence, analyzing the evidence, and also critically making the evidence available to all these stakeholders. Job seekers in particular, students that perhaps are deciding on their careers, businesses, of course, that need to fill their vacancies, and all the government agencies that can play a critical role in the development of labor market information systems. I think information is a very particular type of good or service. Information can be made freely available to anyone. Information, once it is out there, it can be passed from one person to another. So this makes information very special, and also creates a very strong role for the involvement of the government. Private markets, for these reasons, sometimes are not able to provide information as needed. So it's really important to have public employment services and other government agencies to be as active as possible in terms of collecting and disseminating labor market information. And scale is also quite important. As more information is collected, the potential for better matching and better outcomes in the labor market increases at a very rapid pace. So given the characteristics of the public employment services and their leading role in labor markets, public employment services can indeed be very important for the provision of labor market information. And of course, establishing partnerships with other stakeholders can also be very, very important. Let me provide a few examples of the benefits or potential benefits of labor market information systems. Of course, those that are perhaps more pressing at the current times have to do with workers searching for jobs, but also businesses that want to recruit. But it's also important to bear in mind that there are important outcomes at the medium and long term. So, for instance, governments may want to evaluate the different policies that they are implementing, and a good evidence base is quite important in that respect. To have information on the outcomes at the labor market in a detailed manner can make a huge difference in terms of the evaluation of public programs, and that evidence can then be very useful in terms of improving those same programs. So, and of course, one can also think about young persons that are deciding what to study, where to study. Labor market information can again be extremely important in this regard. Let me perhaps move forward to some proposals, some ideas that can be of relevance in terms of the development of labor market information systems. So ideally, I would argue that a labor market information system would have all of these properties that I mentioned in the slides. It would be very rigorous, it would have very good data on the needs of firms and the profiles of job seekers. It would be very representative, covering the different sections of the labor market. It would be fairly economical, that is, it would not be too expensive to collect and to disseminate. It would be very timely, that is, it would depict accurately the situation that the labor market is facing very recently or in the present itself. And it would also lead to actions by the different stakeholders. So, of course, this is a difficult challenge. Collecting information can be a complex activity, but still, I think it's important to have ambitious goals to aim for, and then, depending on the circumstances and the resources available, to focus on one or more of these priorities. So one particular practical proposal, which I would like to underline, has to do with the full use of the resources already available. And in this respect, my experience and the number of studies indicate that a number of countries already have very interesting administrative data that can perhaps be used to a greater extent. And indeed, there were some references in previous presentations about this aspect. Social security agencies and departments in some circumstances already collect quite rich data, even if largely focused on the formal sector of the labor market, that in any case can have a strong potential in terms of understanding what is happening in the labor market, where the new vacancies are coming from, where the new jobs are being created. And that information can be very helpful to job seekers, but also to other agencies that perhaps are focusing on the provision of skills. I mentioned the issue of the formal sector, but of course one needs to bear in mind that in many countries the informal sector is very large. And of course, in that sense, the informal sector also deserves a lot of attention. Fortunately, new technologies allow for a better analysis and a better understanding of the evolving needs and opportunities also in the informal sector. And I would recommend that, again, more attention is paid on the informal sector, also from the perspective of the labor market information system. And in this respect, I will highlight the role of mobile phones. Everyone in many countries, or nearly everyone in many countries, has a mobile phone, even if it may not be a very sophisticated mobile phone, it may still allow for some greater involvement in labor market information systems, so that one provides information about job opportunities. So perhaps in the interest of time, I would move forward. The slides will be made available, and more discussion about these and other issues can take place at a later time. I would like to perhaps focus on this additional idea, which is about the role of the internet in assisting the development of labor market information systems. So we know that in the last few years, labor market matching is increasingly taking place online in the internet. And this means that there are a number of records, a number of data points that again can be used to feed the labor market information system. So, for instance, job opportunities are increasingly advertised online, and it is possible using different technologies to collect all that information that is registered online to feed the labor market information system, so that one knows where the new job opportunities are created, what are the job profiles that businesses are looking for, and again, make that information available more widely, and also feed information from the perspective of skills and vocational education and training, for instance. So I mentioned in the slides a number of examples in which this approach is being adopted, including in terms of the informal sector, from a very diverse range of countries in the European Union, in Sweden, but also in developing economies and countries such as Mozambique. So in many different countries around the world, interesting steps are being taken to collect the information on labor market opportunities and make that available more widely, so to facilitate the adjustment process in the labor market. Perhaps well, let me again underline the aspect regarding administrative data. So as I mentioned before, I think there is a very strong potential in terms of greater use of existing social security, social protection information, such as registrations of jobs, such as provision of support to different individuals. That information can perhaps be used to a greater extent from the perspective of understanding the labor market and its changing needs, in particular in the current difficult context with the ongoing pandemic. I have one final slide, which is about another illustration of the opportunities that follow from existing data, including data collected directly by the public employment services. This last slide is about a background study that I wrote for the Global Employment Trends for Youth report produced by the ILO. And this study is based on comparable micro-level data that was kindly made available by 3 public employment services from different parts of the world, namely Belgium, Morocco, and South Korea. These are very comprehensive data sets as they cover all the vacancies and all the job seekers that registered over a period of 5 years. A number of very interesting results were found from this analysis, and I think these are results that can be of great interest in terms of policy making. For instance, one particular result had to do with the fact that despite the very long list of occupations in each labor market, depending on the classification methods, this can be 400, 500, even more occupations. It turned out that most vacancies and most job seeker registrations were concentrated in a fairly small number of occupations. In some cases, as few as 10 or 20 occupations were responsible for up to 1/3 of all the registrations in the labor market. So I think this is, for instance, evidence that would support policies that are more directly targeted to these particular occupations, given that they appear to be responsible to a large share of the labor market. So there were a number of additional results. We don't have time now, but perhaps in a different occasion this can be discussed further, which I think provide interesting insights into actual policy making that can help the development of the labor market. I will conclude now. I have a few additional slides that you may want to read from the study, but I will conclude with some of my key messages, namely that information is critical for an effective, efficient, and equitable labor market. Information can make a big difference also from the perspective of social protection. I would like to highlight that point. By providing information, individuals will be better able to address the challenges that they are facing. And I think these aspects are particularly relevant in times when the economy and the labor market are changing very, very quickly. And finally, there are, I think, a number of data sources and the data sets that are already available that perhaps are not yet fully used. So I believe that the public employment services and other agencies can play a leading role in this process of making more extensive use of these data sources, and in that way promote a faster recovery in these challenging times. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. I have a couple of questions for you that I would like you to answer very quickly. We are running a little bit late with regards to the schedule that we had set out. The first, there was a question around the role of big data and how it can be used to improve our information systems, and in your opinion, what this would look like. And then we had a second point as well. Someone else was asking, what is the best governance for this type of information for a country? Do you think that this comes from the statistical services or the employment services? If you could answer very briefly, I'd be grateful for that.
Questions? Yes, I believe big data is critical in this process. I think the access to large data sets can allow public employment services and other stakeholders to understand the evolving trends in the labor market more accurately. And of course, it can also facilitate better matching between employers and job seekers. I think this is also part of the contribution of labor market information systems. If one can have more accurate information, more detailed information about the specific needs of businesses, and on the other hand, on the specific profiles of job seekers, which is something that big data can greatly facilitate, then the quality of the matching that follows from that can be greatly improved. So this leads to businesses that will be happier with the profiles that they are recruiting. This will lead to job seekers that will be happier with the workplace where they are at. And this will lead to more productive firms, which can then facilitate economic growth and better working conditions. So I think big data is something that can really make a huge difference for the better. As to governance, I believe this is highly country specific. If it happens that national statistical agencies are better endowed in terms of human resources, in terms of technical facilities, it may be more appropriate that national statistical agencies take a leading role in this process. If, on the other hand, there is a good endowment in terms of these dimensions with public employment services, then perhaps the latter will be better positioned. From my experience, public employment services tend, of course, to have a greater awareness of the specificities of the labor market. They are closer to social partners that, of course, play a key role in many countries around the world, and this can facilitate a leading role to be played by public employment services. But again, it will depend on the specific circumstances of each country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Martins. Thank you very much for these clarifications. I think that we could go straight to the second panel, and I will be handing over the baton to a new moderator, to Madame Gayatri Radival from SOCSO.
Please take the floor, introduce yourself, and take over the role of moderator. You have the floor.
introduction and also for inviting me to be a moderator for this afternoon, second part of the WAPES Asia Pacific Regional Virtual Conference. I'm Gayatri, Head of Employment Services of the Social Security Organization of Malaysia, and I'm indeed honored to be part of this virtual conference, and we certainly look forward to learning and gain insights from the speakers, especially this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, the unprecedented COVID pandemic faced by many countries has impacted employment very deeply, as shared by several experts as one of the far-reaching or most severe since the Second World War, affecting billions of workers who are employed in sectors that see a steep decline. Quoting the Savills research, across 24 global country markets found 67% of the countries reported a moderately negative market impact, while 27% cited a severely negative impact. At a sector level, healthcare, logistics, and to a lesser extent, institutional residential areas currently are the most resilient across occupier demand and investment activity. Meanwhile, sectors such as retail, which is already undergoing a structural change prior to the COVID pandemic, has seen its woes amplified by this virus. Hotels or the tourism industry, as well as, it also felt an immediate impact from the international travel restrictions and domestic lockdowns as well. Not only referring to sectors, but also populations that are most vulnerable to the adverse labor market outcomes, including the older workforce, women, persons with disabilities, individuals with minimal working experience, where this impact certainly calls for a concerted effort to find creative ways in bridging this gap we need to fill arising from this pandemic. Let me quote the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. What he said was, "The world of work cannot and should not look the same after this crisis. It is time for a coordinated global, regional, and national effort to create decent work for all as the foundation of a green, inclusive, and resilient recovery." So with that, ladies and gentlemen, with that message in mind, I would like to invite our distinguished speakers who will speak on the theme, calling on for policies to support the most affected sectors and population. I will first introduce all four speakers for the first part of the afternoon, and questions and answers will be held after each session of the speaker, which I will gather from the chat group as well. So if there are any questions, please do feel free to type them out. And so let me introduce the first speaker of the session, Mr. Sher Singh Verik from the ILO. He is the head of Employment Strategies Unit in the Employment, Labour Market and Youth Branch in the ILO Geneva. Prior to this position, he was the manager of the Employment Policy and Analysis Program of the International Training Center of the ILO and Deputy Director of the ILO Decent Work Team for South Asia Country Office for India. He has also worked for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and various research institutions in Europe and Australia. He holds a master's degree in development economics from the Australian National University and a doctorate in economics from the University of Bonn. Since 2004, he is a research fellow of the Institute of Labour Economics, IZA, and through various roles, he has led and undertaken policy-oriented research and training to promote the formulation and implementation of more effective employment policies. And this is Mr. Sher Singh Verik from the ILO. And the second speaker of the day, we have Mr. Ji Yong Yoon, who is the Director, International Cooperation from Korea Employment Information Services. And he will be presenting on the COVID-19 related employment maintenance policy in Republic of Korea. Some of his past experience includes him being a researcher, analysis, and forecast employment statistics with HRD Services Korea, as well as the administration staff, internal communication for Human Resource Development Korea. And he's currently the Director, International Cooperation. Some of his accomplishments include public employment service reforms and labor market intelligence initiative with the Asia Development Bank, a policy advisory service for establishing public employment labor system in Sri Lanka, Korean Asian ILO training workshop on employment insurance services, as well as being involved in the PES, Public Employment Services IT system implementation project for Cambodia and Vietnam as well. So we'd like to welcome the second speaker. And the third speaker we have for this afternoon is Mr. Hisham Busaid. Hisham Busaid, with his title, COVID-19 and the Response to the Tunisian Public Employment Services. Mr. Hisham is currently the Director of Programs and Services for Companies within the National Agency for Employment and Self-Employment. He held position of Regional Director of Employment and Vocational Training in the Governorate of Monastir in 2018. He started his professional career with the NAT in 2000 as Employment Counselor, at the Department of Placement, Insertion and Regional Consolidation, and is mainly responsible for the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of active employment programs. He is also in charge of providing counseling and guidance to employment agencies in labor market intermediation. He is also a member of the technical committee working on the development of the National Employment Strategy and is president of the committee in charge of the development of the Entity Model Employment Agency Services Offer. And last but not least, very pleased to also introduce Mr. Thierry Fiquet. He's been very much involved for this organizing of this conference, has been since 2017 the technical key expert, and currently since 2019 the development and technical advisor on labor and employment as a member of the team SOSIX, the European Union facility on social protection, labor and employment, which provides short-term and peer-to-peer EU expertise worldwide. During 20 years, Mr. Fiquet had held many high management positions in the French Public Employment Services, Pôle Emploi, and National Vocational Training Agency AFPA at the local, regional, national, international level as an international PES expert in the same time. He was also in 2010 a counselor in organizational development during the merging period of Unemployment Insurance Service and the former National Agency of Employment, and in 2016 he had held the position of National Project Manager for the National Plan 1 Million Training for Job Seekers. So without further ado, we have the great pleasure of inviting the first speaker of the day, Mr. Sher Singh Barik from the ILO. So over to you, Mr. Sher Barik Singh. Thanks. Over to you.
Well, good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. I'd like to start by thanking WAPES, Thierry in particular, and of course the moderator of the session, Gayatri, for this opportunity. It's a real pleasure to join you today. And I've been listening with great interest the presentations that have been made already this morning, and I'm going to provide another perspective that touches on a number of the issues that have been addressed, but I'm going to step back a bit and look at the global perspective somewhat, and looking at both the issues around impact and policy response. So let me start with something that we all know. I think, COVID-19 has been a devastating crisis that has affected the whole world, in particular through the lockdown and containment measures, which have led to demand and supply side shocks. It has also created a lot of uncertainty, and in the graph here, I'm just showing the percentage of workers affected by workplace closures. And a lot of these graphs I'm about to show you are all contained in the ILO Monitor. It's a new publication that we started during the COVID-19 crisis, and this one comes from the 6th Monitor. And I would encourage you to also look in the Monitor for further details. But here in this graph, which is from the 6th Monitor, it shows that starting in early this year, we saw a huge increase in the number and the percentage of workers covered by workplace closures. And I won't go into the details about the different colors and the different levels, but it has changed somewhat over time, going from the most severe lockdown measures to weaker measures. And now, of course, we have even new severe restrictions in place in a number of countries, including in Europe where we are. But overall message is that the vast majority, over 90% of workers, have been affected by workplace closures during this year, which has really been the shock that has affected the economy the most. And when we look at the impact, I just want to pause a little bit on this because of the issue of data. Now, that has come up already in the previous presentations, and Professor Martins has addressed this in detail. But even for the ILO, when the crisis started, we first looked at our own data, our own models, to see how we would monitor the crisis. And it quickly became apparent that our standard models and our normal data that we use for global and regional levels were not suitable. We had to actually adjust completely the modeling approach we took to address the very unique nature of this crisis. And we shifted to a nowcasting model to look at working hour losses, which best captures these demand and supply side shocks that I've just mentioned. And I won't go into the details about this. Again, it's in the 6th Monitor. But this model has provided us with these insights on the losses that we've seen throughout the year. And in the 6th Monitor, we reported working hour losses in the second quarter of this year of around 17.3%, equivalent to almost 500 million full-time jobs around the world. Now, I would stress, and you can see the diagram and in the monitor, all regions have been affected, all countries have been affected, but some have been more so. So in particular, the lower middle income countries and some regions such as the Americas, where we saw a decline in working hour losses of around 28% in the second quarter. Absolutely devastating losses in Latin America in particular. Now, as also have been already mentioned, we of course seen certain sectors hit much harder, and we've analyzed these issues as reported in a number of the ILO monitors. And as been referred to already, accommodation and food service, retail have been devastated because of these lockdown and containment measures. Tourism with the bans on border closures, etc. We also see and had also projected the worst impacts on certain groups, and women and youth have been particularly vulnerable, and those in the informal economy. So over the year, we've of course got more and more data coming from labour force surveys, and I also want to pause there, in relation to Professor Martin's presentation, because during this year, many national statistical offices have of course had major difficulties in getting the labour force survey data, which is the gold standard to get indicators and information on the labour market. But many of them have also adapted to phone surveys, as Professor Martins referred to. So, randomized phone surveys have been very important. South Africa, for example, shifted to that in the second quarter, etc. But some countries have been releasing data over the year, and this graph just shows you some of the declines in employment in the second quarter compared to the previous year. And so what we see is going from these working hour losses that are overall projections for the world and regions. What we're seeing in actual country level data are some catastrophic declines. Again, in the Americas, where you see more than employment declining by more than employment. It has been lower in other regions, and including Asia, etc. But it has also been much more worse for women than men. But a very important point as well I want to note, and this is very important for the policy response, is that in the second quarter and somewhat in the third quarter, we saw that this decline in employment translating much more into an increase in inactivity than employment. So in some countries, unemployment has remained very flat, but you've seen a big spike in inactivity. And this is partly due to the unique nature of this crisis. People were not able to undertake job search, or were not available to take up work. So because of the lockdown measures, so that made them be defined as inactive. But nonetheless, it's a real issue to monitor how people are, where they are and whether they're undertaking job search or not, which has very important implications for overall employment policies, but also specifically the role of public employment services, of course, and active labour market programs. The last point I would like to make on the data side is something that's probably, I think, obvious to us now, is that we're not seeing a V-shaped recovery in most countries. Very few countries, as has already been noted, have got the pandemic under control. We saw these very deep declines, and these figures showing our estimates that I mentioned, the working hour losses, 17.3% decline in the second quarter. But we have also estimates for the third quarter, and our projections for the final quarter show that we will, by the end of the year, we will still see a very large job deficit. And I have to say, these figures were done at the end of August into September, and since then, as I've mentioned, and as many of you are aware, we have many new lockdown measures, which will mean that the situation will further deteriorate in a number of countries. And there are not many countries where it is improving quickly. So really, we're facing a slow, painful, and uncertain recovery, which will continue well into next year and beyond. Now let me move to policy responses, and I think this crisis has been very different. It's been unprecedented. It's a word that has been used very, very much in this context. But I would also stress that the policy responses in many cases have been very decisive and in fact often unprecedented. I mean, for example, in terms of the overall fiscal stimulus, according to the IMF figures, the total fiscal packages around the world amounted to almost $12 trillion globally, or close to 12% of GDP. I have some figures on that in the next slide, but just, you know, making that general point. There's the overall challenge that is there about balancing and sequencing of policy. This is a very unique part of this crisis as well, because the main objective, of course, is to control the pandemic. So we have the health measures, the containment measures that are needed to keep the pandemic under control. But at the same time, we are dealing with the economic, employment, and social outcomes of that. And of course, the premature loosening of health measures risks prolonging the pandemic, and of course, which in turn would worsen the labour market impact. And for the reasons that I've already mentioned in terms of the continuing crisis and the overall uncertainty, it's clear that support for jobs and labour income will need to continue well into 2021, to keep employment and businesses and incomes afloat. At the same time, a really crucial question is how to adjust support to the growing and target sectors. So we don't have an even recovery. Even in the countries where recoveries are underway, certain sectors are responding faster. So one part of it is how the sectors adapt, and another part is what sectors we also, what countries want to see in terms of moving to, strengthening the care economy, the green economy. There's a lot of discussion on that, and of course the digital economy. And public investment will play a critical role there as we go forward. Obviously, given the situation, it is absolutely critical that we, continue to look at the vulnerable and hard-hit groups, including women, young people, informal workers, and they have to remain a priority. So I think a really important part of looking at policy measures and the monitoring of those policy measures, which is absolutely critical given the fast-moving nature of this crisis, is to see whether these groups are benefiting to the extent they should be, given that they have been hit harder. Obviously, over the longer term, the social protection system, the public employment services, active labour market programs need to be strengthened to improve the overall resilience of the labour market. Now, of course, I just would stress that, given the complexity of these challenges, social dialogue, as we, of course, stress at the ILO, and as you would all understand, is absolutely critical to look at these types of employment policy responses, including that type of monitoring. I mean, I don't think I can stress that enough, because we are not in a position to do one-off assessments and say, well, we know what's happening in the labour market. It has changed so many times this year, even from us looking at the global, regional, and also the work we do at the country level. So, critical is to keep that process of collecting data, analysing that data, but it only becomes, meaningful when you bring this also together with social dialogue to talk to the social partners, the employer organisations, the worker organisations, and other stakeholders to really understand what is going on. So just quickly on the fiscal stimulus, I don't have time to go into those figures. These are figures from the IMF Fiscal Monitor. I just would make the point that, while the levels have been much higher than in previous crises, including the global financial crisis, it has been unevenly distributed, and you can, in advanced economies, the fiscal stimuluses have been very large, 10% and above. Emerging market economies has been more around 3%. And you can't see Malaysia there for our host in Malaysia, but I was checking the data. Malaysia's to the right of that, so relatively large stimulus package for emerging market and middle-income countries. But the real issues, of course, is for the low-income developing countries. And we estimate at the ILO that a fiscal stimulus gap is around almost $1 trillion in these low-income and low-middle-income countries. And this gap represents the resources that these countries would need to match the average level of stimulus relative to the working hour losses in high-income countries. So to meet the same sort of level of financing, and that is one of the critical issues now for countries is financing measures. We've seen in a number of countries already that new subsidies have been announced 2-3 months long, and then things are one-off transfers. I mean, particularly in low-income and lower middle-income countries, one-off transfers, and then it stops. And so real critical issue is how to finance these measures over the coming months and years, and then to really have that as a resilient part of a resilient system. And obviously cannot go into the details now, don't have time, but there are many questions about how to do that in terms of financing fiscal deficits through of course a domestic perspective, but also in terms of international cooperation, debt relief, development finance, etc. now I know I'm running out of time. A lot has been said about wage subsidies. I mean, job retention schemes more broadly covering wage subsidies and the short time work schemes, and this has been there before we saw then the global financial crisis, but we've seen a much greater use of them even in this crisis. And as the Malaysian presentation stressed, it has played a critical role. And we see already by May 2020, 50 million workers were covered in the OECD by such measures. I mean, everyone, there are many many European schemes, and Germany's Kurzarbeit, of course, the chômage partiel in France. A lot of well-established track record and use of those types of schemes. But what is also very interesting is the use of new schemes, new wage subsidies, for example, in South Africa, Argentina, and others. Many middle-income countries are really experimenting with these subsidies. I mean, it's too early to say how effective they are. We've been looking at some of that data, but it's really interesting, and it is very encouraging to see countries experiment with these subsidies. But the question again will be how much that benefits, you've got the formal economy versus the informal economy, etc. So, and for that reason, social protection is absolutely crucial. I won't go into those details, but, ILO is also monitoring that through the ILO Social Protection Monitor, and you can get more details on that. But just as a final slide, and I think I'm out of time, but, I think the real critical issue is, going from these immediate policy responses into a recovery strategy and looking at the longer term. And we see elements of these recovery efforts in countries, countries ready to kickstart the economy. But what we want to stress is that countries need coherent and comprehensive strategies on, especially on employment and social protection that will support this. And as I also mentioned already, I mean, we see countries shifting to hiring subsidies. I mean, hiring subsidy during the immediate part of the crisis weren't obviously going to be very effective, but now as countries are opening up, some emphasis is being shifted to the hiring subsidies. For example, in Australia, the new job maker subsidy, which was building on its wage subsidy before, the job keeper subsidy as it was called, and their adjustments are going on into those job retention schemes. But looking at the longer term, and I mentioned the green economy, digital economy, so how to invest in those sectors to promote jobs, decent work in them that will address the deficit that we see. Korea has the Green New Deal and the Digital New Deal. The EU budget has put a 30% allocation as part of a stimulus plan to the green economy. Germany has increased budget for technology, etc. And China has been putting effort on vocational skills. But as we've heard already from other speakers, there are many efforts on the digital side. And I just leave the question, of course, is are we able to move to a better future of work with this? And this is something the ILO and our Director General has stressed. We don't want to just get back to where we were before, but really we want to build back better. We want to build back a better future of work that will address many of these issues and these deficits that have been there, and particularly the inequalities that have been exacerbated during this crisis. So let me leave it there, and thank you very much. I have also listed some I've got some links on the presentation that you can go and see further information on some of the issues I've talked about. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, moderator. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shersing, for the very insightful presentation. I don't see any questions on the chat group, but I have a question for you. You mentioned, monitoring the policy is something that's very critical in ensuring that the benefits that's been provided are given rightfully and sufficiently to those who are in need. How does the ILO actually observe these developments today, and how does it develop these recommendations, particularly in the area of employment? And do you have a measure or an assessment where they are applied by different countries? Over to you, Mr. Shersing.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. So at the ILO, we're working at the global, the regional, and the country level. But I think it's very important to stress the country level work. We work closely with our constituents, the governments, the ministries of labour is our focal ministry, and other ministries as well, which are crucial in this time. Of course, also with the workers and employers organisations. And what we've been doing, just very practically, because it's also something that I've been very much occupied with this year, we've been supporting a lot of these rapid assessments that have been done on the COVID impact. And we've been doing this in around 40 countries, to support, this very big challenge that I've talked about, and also Professor Martins and others have talked about, when, we need to have some insights on the impact, even if we don't have the data. So, saying we have no data is not a good enough answer. So we've worked a lot on assessments, doing different types of exercises on data collection, analysis, etc. And then we've been working very carefully and closely on the policy side to embed that within national employment policy processes, and where countries are adjusting their strategies on employment policy to the crisis. So providing technical assistance on the policy level. We, of course, in terms of public employment services, we have a whole team in Geneva and also in the field working with countries on strengthening and supporting public employment services respond to this crisis through different means. So there's a whole bunch of things we're doing, and it's really a priority for us at the moment to provide the global regional perspectives, but also really to bring that down to the country level through the technical assistance we provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shev Singh. And over to the second speaker for today, for the afternoon session, we have Mr. Yi Yong Yoon, Director, International Cooperation from Korea Employment Information Services. Over to you, sir.
Excuse me for the interruption, but we have no sound. We're not hearing you. So I don't know. I will pass the floor back to you so we can try again. Once again, sorry for the interruption, but we still have no sound. Can you try refreshing your browser, please? I'm waiting for Mr. Yoon to refresh the browser. Once he comes online again, I will pass the floor to Mr. Yoon again. Mr. Yoon, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me? Please type the chat who can hear my sound. Yes, okay, good. But I can't control, but okay. Okay, hello everyone. I'm the Jiyoung Yoon, who is the charge of international cooperation in Korea Employment Information Service. And it is honored to attend this conference. And I would like to thank you, SOCSO officials and WAPES colleagues for their effort to prepare for this event. And despite the difficult situation caused by COVID-19. And also thank you to our online audience. The order I present today is as follows. Okay, according to the Johns Hopkins data as of the November 13th, the South Korea had a very low level in COVID-19 confirmed case. There's a low percentage of the population, and also Korea's COVID-19 responding is very unique in compared to the other countries. That meaning is we did not lock down, and applying testing and tracing the social distancing, and run all the economy and job center as usual. And however, but COVID-19 is influencing the full swing with the number of the unemployed reaching over 1 million in both the last 2 months, September and October. And this is the first record in 20 years since 1999 in Korea. In terms of the number of employed employees, it has continued to decline over the past 8 months in Korea. I think that mainly because number of new job offers was declined, and we saw that the buy industry, in hotels and restaurants, and the wholesale and retail and education service and the manufacturing industry were hit hardest. It's very rapidly decreased in new job offers. And so, Korean government has been make a lot of the policy for the Asian and the proactive unemployment insurance program to mitigate the social and economic impact. First of all, we have to implement the short-time worker sharing program for unemployment people since February. The Ministry of Employment and Labor decided activity support in short-time worker in order to prevent unemployment. And so the 73,000 companies and 1.5 million employees applied for these STW programs. Is compared with in last year, the 1,514 companies and 77,000 employees at the time. And at the end of May, the 240,000 employees of 34,000 companies received in this short-time work fund and 237 million US dollar from the unemployment insurance fund. And maybe up to the 90% of wages, 58 US dollar a day. And in Korean government also increased the budget to 850 million US dollars, covering 520,000 employees. And so short-time work is a key measure of most countries fighting against the labor market impact of the COVID-19. And second, we have to provide funding for the self-employed people and the freelancer and the platform workers. So Korean government for the quick support, most of them use the mobile or online platforms, and for those who could not use online platform, offline the job centers, they helped that people. So benefit payment without delay is a key priority in Korean government. So to that end, the Ministry of Employment and Labor hired 1,300 temporary workers and mobilized at the full-time employees for implementation in this program. So I think it is very efficient way to against the COVID-19 situation problems. Next. And also the Korean government via the job creation for youth, because the young generation, youth generation is very huge damage from the COVID-19 situation. So we make 550,000 jobs and we use it by the 3 billion US dollars. So we are creating the cyber digital government jobs in 100,000 and public work in the 300,000, and use digital jobs and the internship is 100,000. And also the Korean government support the re-employment. So use job search allowance to 50,000. So in 500 US dollars per per month up to 6 months for the use job search allowance. Next. And let's look at the emergency disaster support policy beside on the employment insurance. The first is national employment disaster support for every family. Korean government give money for every family is divided by in person. The one person is $328 US dollars and per person is $820 US dollars for give the money in May, and paid all family in 2 weeks, because we use in the family to use the credit card. We are in Korean government in paying the credit card fees. And the second, the regional government emergency disaster support up to $820 US dollars depend on the regional government. And so the expanding coverage of a social protection program from the COVID-19 crisis. So Korea government decided to introduce unemployment assistance program from the July in this year, $410 US per month for 6 months. So we use the budget of 410 billion US dollars. But in emergency disaster support for every family has for the first time in Korea. So this is the initial discussion on the introduction of the basic income in Korean society. There is effort by the Korean government to produce the tangible result in the COVID-19 response. According to the IMF's 2020 economic growth forecast, Korea is expected to post the highest economic growth rate among the OECD members, and employment-related indicators stable compared to the other countries. And I mentioned before, without restricting freedom and movement in Korea in COVID-19 situations. So what is the learned from in Korean government in policy about the COVID-19? First, social protection scheme is the key measure to mitigate the impact of the labor market from pandemic. And the 3 factors as below: the Korean employment-related initiative to COVID-19. First, the government's swift response, and second is collection and utilization of employment statistics, and last one is customized response policy by the target. So I finished my presentation here. I wish you the health of those who attended today's conference. Thank you. And back to moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Ji-young, for your wonderful presentation. We have a question from Puan Nur Layali from the Department of Statistics of Malaysia. She shares that she's impressive that you were able to identify the vulnerable workers out of the traditional social protection system. She would like to know how they are located and as well as how they are measured as well. Over to you, Speaker. Thank you.
This is because Mr. Martin said before, in Korea, so the most developing in labor market information system in the world. So we gathering data from it, that kind of the information, labor market information system. Our, for example, the WorkNet is a job matching site, and the employment insurance networks, and we call the HRDNet is in training network. So we get some data from that information network in real time. So in Korean government can distinguish some who need some subsidy or the help from the government. Okay, back to floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ji-young. I hope that your question was answered, Puan Lali. And as we are running out of time, I think we could already take one question from Mr. Ji-young. Nevertheless, we would like to move over to the next speaker for this evening. We have Mr. Hisham Busaid, the Director of Programs and Business Services at ANETI, who will present on COVID-19 and the response of the Tunisian Public Employment Services. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Bonjour.
Good morning, everyone. If I may have my presentation. May I ask for the presentation to be shown?
Excuse me for the interference. You can move the presentation yourself by using the arrows on the sides of the presentation, the grey arrows back and forward on the sides of the presentation. Thank you.
Can you see my presentation? Is it okay? Can you see it? How do I move on to the next slide? I'm going to start. I can't see the arrows.
Sorry, if you want to move the presentation on the left and the right of the presentation, you have the arrows next and previous. By pressing on these arrows, you can move the presentation. Please remind that you have to use the presentation that is on the screen, and you cannot share a presentation that is on your own laptop. So if the presentation is already on the screen, use the arrows on the sides of the presentation to move back and forward. I will pass the floor back to you now.
Is this the keyboard arrow or the one on the screen? Now can you see the presentation? Can you see it? Are we good to go? Can I start? I'm just going to jump in here so that I can go through the presentation. Mr. Boussaïd, you have to click on your slide. You're the one who can see the next arrow. So I'll start with the presentation. You now have the floor and you'll now be able to move the slides. Thank you very much. I have been listening to the other presentations and I realise that we've all been affected in the same way by COVID-19. However, in Tunisia, we were already in a period of socio-economic crisis prior to COVID-19. This is a framework that I'm going to set to talk to you about ANETI. ANETI is a public employment service. I am going to review the situation linked to COVID-19 as well as its impact on our labour market. We are going to also speak about the different programmes and initiatives that have been rolled out. My name is Hisham Boussaïd. I'm the head of services for the Tunisian labour market. We work with Pôle Emploi, but we're also an independent agency. We are long-standing on the labour market in Tunisia. You can see that we are the National Tunisian Agency for Employment Services, and we employ more than 1,500 employees over 40% of whom are women. Our average age of the workforce is 45 years old, and most of them have come out of higher education. What are our different missions? I'm not going to read through them, you can see them on the slide, but in a nutshell, we are the only governmentally supported service. We play an intermediary role on the Tunisian labour market. We look at different professional qualifications, we develop information both for companies and job seekers, and we implement different programs to promote employment. We promote self-employment and entrepreneurship. To speed things up, let me speak about NET's network. We have a considerable network, 112 regional offices. We also have the best and the highest performing network, which allows us to work hand in hand with our clients. We have a coverage rate, a terrestrial coverage rate that is very high. What are our flagship programs? We've got the main programs, and these are essential for us to succeed in our work on the labour market and to help bridge that gap between job seekers and their coveted positions. I was talking about the different flagship programs of NET. We've got CIVP, it's professional insertion. These are different apprenticeships that we offer. We have about 100,000 internships and apprenticeships that are offered. This for those coming out of higher education. We've also got the Karama program. This is a product for employers and businesses to employ not only those who are coming out of higher education, so fresh on the market, but also those who have been unemployed for a prolonged period of time. We work with NGOs, but also with governmental organizations. We have different tools and instruments to help create projects in the framework of entrepreneurship. Moving on to COVID. I'm not going to speak about this for a lot, but this is really the buzzword and the main concern that we're here to discuss. We have been living with COVID for 8 months now in Tunisia. The COVID-19 pandemic developed in Tunisia and has been developing since March in 2020. We have more than 80 cases, 20,000 current cases, and 2,300 deaths in Tunisia. We've also been able to succeed thanks to measures taken in order to stop the propagation of the virus. From the month of September, unfortunately, we're seeing that that COVID is back and that the spread of COVID has sped up. I'm going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 and sharing figures with you. Several studies have been conducted in order to better understand the consequences and the impact of COVID-19 on the Tunisian economy for the year underway. A couple of figures for you. Our unemployment rate has gone from 15.1 in January 2020 to 21.6 for May 2020, which means that we've had 275,000 new unemployees, which has had an impact on our GDP. Our GDP has had a recession of 6%, especially if we look at manufacturing, tourism, or non-manufacturing industries, tourism, transport and textiles. The current unemployment rate is 16.1%. For our third quarter, 746,000 job seekers, 632,000 for 2020. When we look at those who are unemployed but who have been through higher education, 281,000, going from 30.2 to 30.1 for percentages between Q1 and Q2. Next slide, a couple of figures for you to better understand this impact. I forgot to mention and this actually needs to be confirmed by studies, the number of unemployed job seekers according to different indicators that have been given from the National Statistics Agency, 161,000 new unemployed job seekers. If I move back to the impact of COVID-19, according to the indicators given by NSE, we have seen an increase in the flow. The DEFM, which is the end of month job applications, between October 2019 and October 2020, there has been an increase of above 104%. You can really understand the magnitude of the impact of COVID-19. In addition, we have a decrease of 49% when looking at job vacancies, because the different sectors have been hit by COVID. For those who want to create their micro-enterprises, those who are self-employed, these businesses have seen a decrease of 35%. Tunisia has tried to respond in every way possible by implementing a series of measures. I'll only talk about a couple of them. If we look at our social measures to start off with, payment for certain categories of self-employed workers. You have one-off exceptional and provisional monthly allowances, 200 dinars. We've also got postponement of employers' contributions to statutory social security. This has been postponed for 3 months with no penalties for late payment. Other measures have been implemented to favour employees that have been affected. We're also providing a provisional allowance of 200 dinars, continued provision of healthcare for public healthcare establishments, and family allowances have also been paid, as well as a single wage increase for those concerned. What are the other social measures? For affected companies and their employees, those who have fixed term or open-ended employment contracts as of the 14th of April 2020 who have been temporarily declared unemployed are entitled to an allowance, once again, of 200 dinars. This is an exceptional one-off payment, and maintenance of healthcare provision and family allowances. In addition, we have other measures. These are tax measures, deferred payment for corporate income tax, suspension of penalties for late payments. We've also got flexibility when it comes to refunding credit for value-added tax. Extension of payment deadlines for road taxes, and suspension of different penalties as well as other measures. In addition, we have financial measures that were taken, including creating a credit guarantee mechanism for those working in sectors and for those companies whose activity was affected. Let's move to NET. What is NET doing? We have also rolled out our own measures in order to tackle the pandemic. We have, following the request of job seekers, implemented a digital training platform with other support programs in different fields. For example, digital programming, languages, soft skills and personal development, business and management, data science, entrepreneurship, arts and design, healthcare, and so on and so forth. Lots of different modules have been uploaded to the platform. NETI also has looked at the impacts of the pandemic in order to accelerate the digital transformation. We have developed several online services, for example, looking at active employment programs, how you can register, re-register and check in remotely. We ensure that we're meeting businesses' HR needs thanks to our platform and our different online follow-up. We know that certain certificates are compulsory for us to register youth and job seekers. We have an attestation, a certificate that can be uploaded with a QR code. We have also developed a web service with the National Social Security Fund. We offer web services to avoid paper documents and also to exchange data to between job seekers and companies to better meet the needs of those using our online services. In addition to this, if we look at the different measures taken by NETI, we have been working hand in hand with the ministry. We have a project looking at a new mechanism helping those who have been fired or made redundant to get back onto that job market. It's a program looking at readapting those who have been made redundant because of economic constraints. We have complementary, or additional rather, services provided and payments of 300 dinar for those who need this. When it comes to employment and recruitment, we also support businesses who need help in this facet. What are other solutions? If we think about service provision and financial aid for small and medium enterprises and very small enterprises, NETI has been able to convince donors to support businesses in order to enable them to maintain their activities. We have helped 2,700 newly created companies, and they will benefit from a subsidy, and this by the end of this month. The amount of this subsidy has been set at 1,200 dinars, which equates to about 400 euros. Furthermore, companies who are subject to the real income tax regime, whose number of employees declared to the national tax system between 4 and 200 will benefit from financial subsidies that will be calculated on the basis of the regression of their revenue and the retention rate of employees during the first quarter. This subsidy will be received in the first quarter of 2021. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Hisham, for your very insightful presentation. Again, we do not have any questions in the chat group, but I do have one question for you. We saw through your presentation that NETI investment in digital transformation. How does NETI actually manage the issues of difficulties in accessing digital services for certain categories of the population face? If you can share that with us. Thank you, Mr. Hisham. Over to you.
That's an excellent question. Thank you. I'd like to give you one figure. In Tunisia, we have 7.5 million citizens who have access to the internet. People are connected, they have smartphones with the internet on it. So this accounts for about 70% of the population. And the education rate is about 90% in Tunisia as well. Our agency covers pretty much the whole territory, and the government works on this issue, and they have created service houses in the territories where we have the highest level of unemployment, with advisors that help people have access to our services. For instance, we have multimedia booths where all the information is available, and this helps job seekers have access to our services. Besides, we are also designing products to improve employability for our job seekers, namely in digitalization. And this product, this service, will help them become more computer savvy and use digital tools, etc. when looking for a job, but also when they get a job once they're employed by a company. Thank you.
We lost Mr. Hisham. Moderator, would you like to pass over to Mr. Hisham since he has not completed his answers?
Si vous voulez, je vais reprendre.
I can take the floor again, but as I said, in Tunisia, we have 7.5 million Tunisian people who are connected, who are able to go online, which accounts for 70% of the population. People have access to the internet, have access to a smartphone, etc. And 90% of the population has a degree. Therefore, we still have people who don't have access to the internet, but the government has put into place service houses, service centers in cities and in regions where we have the highest unemployment rates, where we have advisors who offer all our services to these job seekers to help them have access to these services and to have access to the labor market. We have also designed a training tool to improve employability, especially for young people. It will be rolled out in January 2021, and we will be able to also offer trainings in digital tools, especially for the most vulnerable categories of the population. We will be able to support them and help them get back to the labor market. Thank you.
For the answers. We have another question on the chat group, but I would like, if in the interest of time, we will have to move on to the next speaker, and I trust that maybe Mr. Hisham can reply to your question to the chat box. So our final speaker for today, we have Mr. Thierry Fiquet, who is the Development and Technical Advisor of the Labour and Employment Associates, who will be sharing with you his presentation on facing the crisis, cooperating and sharing technical and international expertise, tools and methods, the associates' responses to new priorities. Over to you, Mr. Fiquet. Thank you.
Hello, I would like to thank WAPES and the different partners who have organized this session, and I would like to thank the Malaysian partner and organizers for associating me to this session. I have to talk about SocioPlus. SocioPlus is a facility that is very adaptable. I only have 3 minutes to talk about it. It will be really difficult to concisely explain what we do. I will try to go straight to the point, and I would like to first tell you that on the website of WAPES and of SocioPlus, you will be able to find all the relevant information that I won't have time to dwell on today. I hope you're able to see my slide. We are also available by email if you want to contact us. You can either contact the SocioPlus team or myself. You can also go on our website, www.socio.eu. And unlike what we have been able to observe recently, we could have scared that the international measures with the travel ban and lockdown would reduce the number of activities with regards to international cooperation, because we were fearing that people were and countries were going to focus on themselves, and it wasn't the case. People have continued to cooperate. We've had a lot of requests. And we have been available with short-term results that were requested. With regards to our principles, we have different flagship principles, which you can see here on this slide. What we want really is to work in partnerships and also in short-term partnerships. What do I mean by short-term? A project is divided into 3 or 4.
Excuse me for this interruption, but can you please make sure that your mic is unmuted and maybe move your mic a little bit closer to your microphone, because the audio level is very low and it's very difficult to hear you. Thank you. I will pass the floor back to you.
Parfait. J'espère que ça passera mieux peut-être de cette manière-là. Donc je disais court terme, 3 ou 4 actions de très court terme avec des binômes d'experts.
Term actions with a pair of experts from the EU, coming from 2 different countries and from 2 different institutions. And the idea behind this is to work in pair. So it's a peer-to-peer expertise based on the 4 pillars that are the core activities of SocioPlus. So social insurance, social assistance, labour market, and employment policies. And in the previous month, we have seen that these pillars are absolutely cross-disciplinary. And our colleague from Malaysia mentioned it, even though we haven't started to work together from what I understand. We will in the near future, but we are working on social protection. We give information on the labor market. We're there also to become an interface between employers and employees. And the rationale of our work is that we implement technical assistance activity in order to improve access to economic activity and therefore access to income, and to have access to the first level of social safety net. You will see my different slides. I know I have very little time left. We have, since 2017, carried out 145 projects based on the 4 pillars that I just mentioned. We are present in 44 countries, mainly in Latin America and Africa, but also in Asia. Hence my presence today, because our ambition is to offer our services to the different public institutions in Asia. As I said, we are working in partnerships, and I would like to give you a few examples of this. We are currently working in 27 countries. I'd like to give us a few examples, including in Côte d'Ivoire, with the expertise of Doctiris, a Belgian partner, A few weeks ago, we went to Rwanda with our Swedish partner, and we also have a project in Suriname. And we are also working in Peru currently, thanks to Pôle emploi, in partnership with Pôle emploi. We work in Cameroon, Senegal, and Benin also currently on a cross-disciplinary project on soft skills, which is more and more essential on the labor market. If you'd like to know more about SocioPlus, on the website you will have the template to fill out a request, and during the COVID-19 we have had to facilitate and shorten access to European expertise with very swift action methodology. I really encourage you to go on the website, and again, if you would like to have more information on SocioPlus, but also if you want to have more details on what Pedro Martins talked about, which is the information system on the labor market, feel free to send us an email. Dear partners, dear colleagues, I went as quickly as I could. I am available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fickett, for voluntarily reducing the presentation time in the interest of time as well. We do not see any questions in the chat group, but I trust that your presentation was very clear, and the tools and methods that you have presented to us will certainly be beneficial to all public employment services providers. Thanks again, Mr. Fickett, for your wonderful insights and guides in assessment tools that will be beneficial for many of us, in fact. Thanks again. And over to the last presentation for this evening, the much awaited for closing remarks from the president of WAPES. We have Mr. Abdel Monin El Madani, who is the president of WAPES and ANAPEX CAO. He was born on the 3rd of June 1967 in Morocco. In 1993, he obtained a degree in higher studies in economics at the Faculty of Law, Economics and Social Sciences of the Mohammed V University of Rabat. He then graduated from the National School of Treasury Services in Paris, Manuel, France in July 1994. From 2013 to 2018, he was, among other things, Director General of the National Mutual Aid and Divisional Chief Inspector, head of the Division of Local Finances to the General Treasury of the Kingdom of Morocco. Since September 2018, he has been the Director General of ANAPEC. Mr. El Madani also holds the position of Mayor of Arrondissement Yaqub Al Mansour in Rabat, after having been Deputy Mayor of the city of Rabat for 2 terms of office. Regarding his international activities, Mr. El Madani was mainly part of the founding team of UCLGA, which stands for United Cities and Local Governments of Africa. He also participated in the organization UCLG World as well. Over to you, Mr. El Madani. Thank you.
Bonjour. Est-ce que vous me recevez?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Hello, we can hear you. But as a host, as a speaker, you cannot hear anyone, so feel free to start your presentation. Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be with you today for the closing of this event. I would like to thank the team of WAPES for the organization of this event, and I would like to thank our regional department in Asia, Sokso Malaysia, and all the organizations and people who have contributed to organizing this event, including ILO and Socio. I would like to congratulate all the speakers because all their presentations were very enriching. The global network of employment services, we have been experiencing this shock. This shock is impacting the whole world, and we have a specific role as PES because we are public operators and we act as intermediary on the labor market. And because we are this intermediary, we are halfway between the two essential components on the labor market, namely, on the one hand side, companies which have been hit by this economic crisis which followed the health crisis, and on the other side we have the job seekers. The job seekers have seen a lot of changes. We have a lot of new job seekers. Yes, they're job seekers, but they have reached the labor market massively, and they are all in a state of shock because no one could have predicted this economic crisis, and therefore the consequences of this economic crisis on the labor market has been very abrupt. So we have this new category of job seekers, and the challenges for PES have been very urgent. But most of our members, the members of this global community of PES, have shown an incredible capacity to react to the situation. They have proved to be very agile, and they have ensured continuity of their services, especially in a time of shock. The continuity of public services in a time of shock contributes to the reduction and the mitigation of the impact of a shock and of a crisis. But this situation has put PES in front of a lot of challenges because we've had to tackle two challenges across the world. First challenge, we had to prepare in order to support the recovery. We had to be able to listen to what companies had to say. We needed to listen to what their needs were and how they had to adapt to the post-COVID world. Companies currently, and this is probably a consequence of this pandemic, but companies need to reinvent themselves. The economic life needs to start again, but people need to adapt in terms of the content of their business, and they need to structure differently. The economic sector, a new hierarchy will arise in terms of importance of economic sectors related to, because the aspects of human lives are now a priority more than ever, and the companies are being asked to review their priorities. Now is not the time to dwell on this, but in parallel, not only did we have to support this economic recovery, but we also have to play our role as social stakeholder, support young people, but also the not so young, to include them again on the labor market. And this entails all the capacity that we have as PES in order to play fully this role. We are at the heart of the main challenge that is currently at stake, that arose from this crisis which is concluding this year, which was unfortunately, and the crisis has underlined the whole year, and I don't think that this is something that we had ever seen in the history of human history. But I think that the resilience of our services was very reassuring. Each in our respective countries, we have been able to ensure the continuity of our services, and we have been able to support different stakeholders in their transformation. We need to be really cautious and to be able to adapt ourselves, to reinvent ourselves. We need to highlight the importance of our public mission. People will probably ask us to redefine the fundamental aspects of our core activities, and I think that this confirms that the role of the government and that our role can be enhanced, and I think that this is the lesson that we can draw from the COVID-19 crisis. We need to work at local level. People need support. People need operators who have the public status that are able to listen to all the different stakeholders of our economy. And I would like to congratulate the organizers of this event for allowing us to share our experiences. And this, I think, will allow us at global level to progress and to make headway. We are able to capitalize on the success stories that we can hear from each country. The digitalization of our services is a challenge that we have all been able to take on. The support of job seekers in this time of crisis has been ensured with the help of the governmental measures, and I think that we have made a lot of progress, but there is still a lot of work to be done. I wish you great success. I wish great success to all the PES in the world. I would like to thank again our colleagues in Malaysia and our colleagues across Asia. Again, we need to work hand in hand in the future. We need to have robust relationships between WAPES and the different partners within WAPES for a better contribution to the benefit of our societies, because this is how we will allow our societies to overcome this crisis, which is currently confronting us to a lot of challenges. But at the same time, this is a great opportunity to improve our services and our action. I would like to thank you again. Good luck to everyone in everything you're undertaking. I hope to see you very soon, physically, in the near future. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening. Thank you. Goodbye. This is the end of this conference. I would like to thank all the different speakers for their contribution. I also wanted to thank the team who has supported us in organizing this web conference and all our partners. I would like to thank you again. And I think we can close this web conference. Thank you very much. See you soon.